Listen to the main theme from The Batman. No, not that. This. The music starts dark and subdued, low-key and on a smaller, more personal scale. It's held back, the 4 notes just giving us the bare bones of the tune. This very much epitomises the Batman at the start of the film, lurking in the darkness, scaring criminals into submission with just the possibility of his presence making grown men scared of the dark. As the theme progresses, however, it takes on a different character. It elevates itself out of the shadowy tone and into a brighter, more optimistic feel. Utilising brass and percussion to present the same 4 notes in a very different way. The music is no longer holding back, no longer relying on the dark tone and instead becoming an orchestral force for everyone to hear. The evolution of Giacchino's theme reflects the journey Batman goes on in this film, coming out of the shadows and into the light, embodying justice rather than vengeance. From the outset, the city of Gotham is a city of mystery, a city of concealment, of hidden truths, of a lone vigilante operating out of the shadows. Gotham is a city shrouded in darkness not only visually but thematically. The truth regarding the major drug bust of Moroni is hidden, with the district attorney rather dying than giving up the rat's identity. Bruce Wayne keeps his identity secret. Hidden truths regarding Thomas and Martha Wayne are buried away beneath years of lies. The journey both Batman and Gotham as a whole go on is one of revelation, revealing these shadowy lies and under-the-table deals. While Batman goes on his crusade of ending petty crime, the Riddler goes on his own. It's the Riddler's mission of bringing the shadowy edges of Gotham into sharp focus that facilitates the film's story. He not only forces Gotham's buried secrets to the surface, but digs up the uncomfortable truth regarding the Wayne family, forcing Batman to look inwards, recognising that he needs to change. He recognises that acting out of the shadows, acting through deceit, lies and fear, is what got Gotham into the state it's in. So he needs to come out of the shadows, embodying hope and justice, rather than vengeance and fear. This change is demonstrated visually. Speaking to Variety, cinematographer Greg Fraser explained how during the opening sequence, when groups of criminals are terrorising Gotham with the bat signal in the sky, they needed to ensure there were dense, dark shadows. He said this is the only time that they have these dark shadows, the only time Batman is almost entirely obscured, entirely operating out of the darkness. It's during this sequence that Batman is truly a symbol of fear for Gotham's underworld, launching a one-man crusade of terror, scaring low-life muggers into submission and beating them into a pulp. Even the man that he saves at the train station is scared of him, cementing his status as a force that inspires fear rather than hope. As the film unfolds, Fraser describes how the visuals constantly fight to find the balance between light and dark. The challenge was ensuring that Batman was sufficiently visible, while still playing into the idea of him being a shadow in the night. Fraser states, "We really needed to make sure that there were dense, black shadows, and that was the point we're trying to make. Batman is lurking in these shadows." However, during the film's finale, Batman is shot more in the light than the dark, demonstrating his character arc on a visual level. When leading people to safety amidst a flooded stadium, Matt Reeves had this to say about the lighting.
One of the things that was important to me, and another place where you were dialing in that red, was that flare moment at the end. Like, it was really important to me because of what it meant that that flare be lighting the scene. And so there's a very subtle amount of sort of, skylight to give it just a little bit of rim, just a little bit of like, what does dark look like in pure dark? But that scene is almost primarily lit with that flare. And the idea of that has a very particular powerful look.
In having the scene being solely lit by the flare Batman carries, it emphasises his power as a beacon of hope. Only he can save Gotham, but to do so he must reject his previous ethos of fear and vengeance, and embrace hope and justice. To reinforce this, after the disaster at the stadium, for the first and only time Batman is shown during the day. Compare the reaction of the man he saved at the subway to the people he saves here. He's completed his journey and become the symbol of hope that Gotham needs him to be. He's no longer lurking in the shadows, and has come into the light. We're very much thrown in the deep end in terms of the timeline for this film. It's clear Reeves wanted to avoid the origin story and present us with a Batman that, while certainly established as a force within Gotham, is in his early days of crime fighting. When the film begins, the criminal underworld is already established to go along with this. Falcone runs things with Penguin as his number 2. It quickly becomes clear that this has not been the status quo for long. The Gotham PD recently busted Falcone's former boss, Maroni, all thanks to a rat. While this may stand as a shining achievement for the police department, part of Riddler's crusade involves revealing this ruse for what it is. Instead of the police beating the criminal underworld, Falcone has taken them under his wing. The bust was more of a coup led by Falcone to get the police on his side. This, alongside the truth of Thomas Wayne's renewal fund, are the two big lies the Riddler sheds light on. For the majority of the film, Riddler's sole objective is to expose the corruption at the heart of Gotham. The city is rotten to the core and the Riddler wants everyone to know this. It's towards the end of the film when it's revealed that his solution to all this is to just burn it all down, believing that the citizens of Gotham are responsible for these lies as they believed them. This is what motivates his flooding of the city and the sniper attacks at the end. While the Riddler watches from the shadows, safe behind his prison bars, for the first time Batman fights out in the open, lighting the way with his flare and becoming Gotham's saviour. In this moment, Batman is at the end of his arc and has realised he needs to change and is now fighting for justice, whereas the Riddler continues to act out of the shadows, no longer concerned with revealing the corruption, but acting out of vengeance. A key turning point for Batman is when he realised his father was not the paragon of humanity he thought he was. He too was culpable of lying and deceit, and like everyone in Gotham was deeply corrupt. His so-called renewal fund was looted by Gotham's worst, and he tried to keep a lid on his wife's mental problems through less than legal means. It's Thomas Wayne's failure to provide appropriate care for orphans that sets the Riddler on his crusade against Gotham's elite. In many ways, Batman and the Riddler act as mirror images of each other. Both orphans, both trying to rid Gotham of crime through ultimately relatively similar means, both using fear and intimidation as their main tool. At the start of the film, they're both motivated by vengeance. Batman exacting this vengeance on muggers and thugs, the Riddler on the corrupt elite, who are realistically more responsible for the state Gotham's in than Batman's victims. After learning of his father's shortcomings and the wider corruption within the city, Batman realises that he can no longer exact vengeance on Gotham's lower class. The problems are more systematic and top-down than that. When fighting one of Riddler's goons in the rafters, he asks him who he is. The goon replies that he is vengeance. It's this moment that truly motivates Batman to change. Yes, there are problems in Gotham, and yes, they need to be solved. But they won't be solved through vengeance. They won't be solved through fear and from the shadows. This is the approach both him and the Riddler have been taking. He needs to change. He needs to fight for justice rather than vengeance. He needs to be a symbol of hope rather than fear. Due to his obsession with vengeance, Batman in this film has a very absolutist worldview. There's no nuance on his crusade. You're either a criminal and deserve to be beaten within an inch of your life, or you're innocent. Speaking to Den of Geek, Patterson states that Bruce is committed so hard to Batman and has a very binary worldview. There are only bad people and there's only totally innocent people. There's no one in between. This reflects his naivety regarding his past and where the true corruption lies. Growing up rich, it's easy to blame the lower class criminals for Gotham's degradation, especially when Thomas Wayne, a symbol of Gotham's philanthropist elite, has been martyred in the eyes of his son. Batman is exacting vengeance on Gotham's criminals for perverting the vision of the city his father had. Of course, he eventually realises this isn't the correct approach, and that his father wasn't the hero he thought him to be, the key step on Batman's journey. But perhaps the first step on his journey, the journey that the film follows a prostitute played by Jane Fonda who crosses paths with a straight-edge small-town detective John Clute. Reeve explains how Clute's such a straight arrow and he seems so naive, and I think he judges her, and he assumes because of the world she's in that she is a certain kind of person, and yet he can't help but be drawn to her, and he can't help but be affected by her. It's clear Reeves mirrored this when building the relationship between Batman and Catwoman. These noir influences are very much apparent from the outset, with the opening narration being lifted out of any hard-boiled noir film. Chinatown, a 1976 neo-noir, is a key influence, providing some of the basic DNA onto which Reeves projects Gotham City. The film follows a private detective in 1930s LA who uncovers a web of lies and corruption that goes all the way to the top, implicating almost every government body in a plot to efficiently funnel more money into the elite's back pocket. While this has a similar premise to The Batman, the two films view this premise from different perspectives. The objective of Chinatown is to uncover this conspiracy. Little is done to remedy or address it. The characters are helpless to stop it and as such must move on, with the very last line instructing the main character to forget about it. Chinatown's outlook is that you can't change things no matter how hard you try. Fighting injustice, as entrenched as it is in the film, is futile. The film delves into the corruption that's shrouded in shadows, but never lights it up for the world to see. Whereas the Batman delves into the dark lies that plague Gotham, but then drags them kicking and screaming to the surface. The outlook of the Batman puts a positive twist on the neo-noir nihilism. You can fight injustice and you can improve your surroundings, just as long as you're a billionaire superhero like Batman.
The city's angry, scarred, like me. Our scars can destroy us, even after the physical wounds have healed. But if we survive them, they can transform us. They can give us the power to endure and the strength to fight.
The Batman is a film about shedding light on the dark corners of society, dragging the corrupt officials to the forefront and forcing them to pay for their crimes, illuminating Gotham's shadowy past and revealing Thomas Wayne as a not-so-shiny Boy Scout he really was. Moving Gotham's caped crusader, who lurks in the dark, scaring criminals and civilians alike, instilling fear across the whole city, into the daylight. Batman turns from a symbol the city is ashamed of to one that it can be proud of. In many ways, this is a coming-of-age story for Bruce Wayne. Throughout the film, his Batman is forced to mature and recognise the responsibility he needs to take on if he wants to truly make Gotham a better place. Much like Giacchino's theme, the Batman follows the titular character's journey from shadowy anti-hero to the heroic symbol of Gotham that he needs to be. A Gotham that the Riddler cast a floodlight over, revealing more bad than good. Batman learns he cannot fight for vengeance, but for justice. He cannot be a symbol of fear, but one of hope. He must come out of the shadows and into the light.